Okay, so then maybe we can start with the meeting already, and maybe in order to follow the agenda, we will start with some welcoming words from the Global Celtic Cluster coordinators. So over to you. I think we will start with Ella. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. So I will just turn on my video for a few minutes for people to see, and I look a bit different to that picture. It looks like. I'm very happy to be able to welcome so many of you in this first virtual meeting that we're having due to, of course, unforeseen reasons compared with last year. You'll remember, if you had been there, of course, that last year we had very different plans for this year's meeting. We were going to change the time so that it would not be coinciding with the HRP cycle. That was problematic for our coordinators, and I'm really sorry that we ended up in this situation. But so a lot has changed in our lives, of course, in the past year, and we have been confronted with new challenges, but also a lot of the work has been going on thanks to all of our country level coordinators and the support team. So hopefully in the course of the next few weeks, you'll be able to exchange ideas and learn from each other, and learn more about our work that has taken place in the last year. I guess one advantage is that it was always an issue how many people could fit in our auditorium in Geneva, or how many people could get a visa for Switzerland. And I think one positive side of the situation that we're in now is that everybody can join. Everyone with an internet connection can join and be part of the conversation. I think maybe that's something that that will really add a lot of flavor and different opinions to the discussion. So I think we will all benefit from that, and I'm very looking forward to that. So Brett will be giving the overview of our common issues and concerns and plans for the cluster. So I'm not going to keep talking that much. I'm very happy to be here and to see all of you, and I look forward to a month of interaction and engagement and learning from one another. Thank you very much, Brett. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. What a pleasure to, well, I was going to say see everyone online, but that's not possible, to at least note the presence. We've got 60 or more people online, and we normally have 160, 180 people attending our annual meeting in Geneva. But I'm very pleased to welcome you all here today, and thanks very, very much, Ella, for the opening comment. Now, it's been a tradition now for around 15 years that shelter practitioners gather in Geneva for our annual meeting, which is a week-long series of events, workshops, training, reconnecting to peers and colleagues, and detailed discussion on what we can do as practitioners, coordinators, professionals and humanitarians to meet the shelter needs of the world's displaced people. It's a busy week and a fun week, but it's also where there's a lot of deep thinking connection, which really pays and has a lot of fruition over the coming 12 months. However, as Ella mentioned, this year the collaboration must take place online, and with this certainly comes challenges, but also something of a silver lining to a year of disruption to our work and our lives. And by this I mean we are now reaching out to even more people who are never able to attend the annual Geneva meeting. I see great leaps forward in the time that I've been involved in the cluster events, with new technologies, data processes, and a whole generation of young professionals who want to help respond to some of the world's most intractable problems when people are forced from their homes due to conflict and natural disaster. Certainly the interplay of these global conditions of natural disaster and conflict is where we see the real tragedy, with protracted displacement, protractedly displaced communities subject to ongoing localised calamities flooding in northwest Syria earlier in the year, more recently Burkina Faso, Sudan, South Sudan. This devastating flooding, for example, erodes the minimum shelter assistance that we're able to provide. But with now more than 100 million people forcibly displaced, we really are in uncharted territory. But the relevance of timely, decent shelter that meets people's needs, providing basic protection and saving lives, it is still now as relevant as ever. We're now collaborating, innovating, partnering in ways unforeseen even 12 months ago. No one could have predicted it. COVID-19 has had to make us smarter, more frugal and more agile. We've had to rethink old wicked problems in new ways. And just as a couple of examples, look, the link between housing conditions, how people live, their built environment and health is now very clear. We've got some great research partnerships and dedicated thematic events, for example, held in the UK Shelter Forum, close collaboration with the health cluster. We're building on detailed research conducted by our partners in interaction, and that's helped us develop a really rich base of evidence around the long-term impacts of shelter programs. This is exciting and really new for humanitarians. It's certainly more common for our development colleagues and those in the private sector. But really the understanding the determinants between living conditions and health outcomes is underappreciated amongst humanitarians. But COVID-19 has made us understand that how you live and your health outcome is inseparable. Apart from that, we have much more evidence of shelter programs as a real bedrock humanitarian intervention that result in much better education and livelihood outcomes, for example, when programmed in tandem with shelter and health. The impact of our work in humanitarian shelter practice is having on the environment and how the imperative of creating greener responses with innovative low carbon products is now at the very centre of our work. Collaboration initiated as part of the work of the environment community of practice in the cluster and with other clusters such as logistics and WASH, where we can join forces and find common solutions to improving the products and supply chain methods for our responses. But more work and donor support is certainly needed, and we need to collaborate more and coordinate to find these greener ways of responding from a whole system-wide perspective. Urban responses have escalated, provided unique and complex operational challenges, and have increased the need for developing more informed and localised area-based coordination and settlement approaches, and we've worked hard in that space. We're moving forward with how we approach urban contexts, supporting local governments and others in cities, for example. Partnerships created through the work of the Urban Settlement Working Group brought together a huge array of stakeholders, development actors, local authorities, communities to work in different ways. Key donors such as OFTA and ECHO have continued to support us in this work. As an example, today I'm joining you from Beirut. We're right from the beginning of the response here after the blast on August the 4th. We began working immediately with the World Bank and the EU on a recovery framework, linking the humanitarian phase to recovery approaches, institutions, local stakeholders in collaborations we've never really done before from the beginning of a shelter response. We're getting better results, leadership of civil society, while linking through to longer term approaches right from the beginning. We're thinking from the long term, from the beginning of the response. Really at the centre of all the work here and around the globe, supporting displaced populations are our partners. From the Geneva side, I'd like to congratulate all the partners, the work of the Strategic Advisory Group for all their strength and collaboration, and membership of all the working groups for their different and innovative thinking and engagement. Many partners are taking on excellent leadership of different components of the cluster work. CRS, Impact, Interaction on Urban Settlements, NRC, IOM, Australian Red Cross on HLP. IOM continued to engage all partners with shelter projects, which has now become something of a collector's edition for aspiring and seasoned shelter practitioners. Furthermore, DRC, IOM, IFRC also very much progressing on decentralised and regional engagement, pursuing localisation to help put affected people and communities in the driving seat when it comes to defining shelter assistance, how they need it and how it will be provided. Lastly, improved data technology analysis seems to leapfrog every few months, from advanced geospatial and design software to modelling settlements to the new Shirin chatbot, which has been developed with the colleagues in Indonesia, to very sophisticated multi-sector analysis that we're going into. We've got more tools and more data than ever before, but we still need to match that with good quality response on the ground, where the data identifies the needs and the gaps, and we match that up with informed and rapid on-the-ground response, scaled up with our donor resources. But in the end, it's dedicated and engaged partners and cluster coordinators on the ground that are there daily to improve local engagement, accountability, delivery. And it really is with my ongoing thanks and admiration to all of them. So thanks, Ella, for your opening comments. Thanks to our partnership with IFRC as global leads and all our partners. And I really wish you all the best for a fruitful global shelter cluster meeting. And I will see you online over the coming month. And I really thank you all for your support and dedication. Thank you. Back to you, Miguel and Pablo.
Thanks, Brett. We will start now with an introduction of the month. We will see how this month is going to evolve. So I will hand over now to Pablo for that explanation. Over to you, Pablo.
Thanks, Miguel. If the presentation can go back online, please. Thank you. Hello all, my name is Pablo Medina. I am the Deputy Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator on behalf of one of the co-lead agencies, IFRC. And in the next few slides, I will briefly walk you through the next shelter months, how we have organized the Global Shelter Cluster meeting, how you can access the different sessions, and what can you access over the next month. As many of you are aware, we used to have what we call the Shelter Week. We have transformed that due to the COVID-19 restrictions to a shelter month. It doesn't mean that we're going to be meeting all month long, but it means that there are going to be sessions all throughout October that you are free to join. No one is expected to join every session, obviously. Just join those that are of interest to you. As in any Global Shelter Cluster meeting, this time we have picked a theme that will guide or provide the framework for the overall discussions that we will have, the different sessions, and this theme for the current year, for the current Global Shelter Cluster meeting, is the impact of shelter and settlement. This is an issue that the theme has been selected by the Global Shelter Cluster Strategic Advisory Group, a group of 11 agencies that drive the strategic direction of the cluster. And it's a theme that has been discussed for some time already, and that the Strategic Advisory Group feels is important to better understand, to better disseminate, so that those outside the shelter and settlement sector also appreciate the contribution of this sector, not just to meeting shelter and settlement needs, but as an enabler to be able to meet other needs as well, such as health, water, sanitation and hygiene, livelihoods, education, etc. So that's the overall theme, and we will be having a few sessions focusing on that theme, but also many other sessions that in one way or another link to the overarching theme for this year's Global Shelter Cluster meeting. The objectives of the annual Global Shelter Cluster meeting are to identify and address issues that emerge from country level clusters and also from global level cluster, at the global level. To review the Global Shelter Cluster deliverables in the year, this is also an accountability exercise from the Global Shelter Cluster Secretariat to the partnership, where we report back to you what has been done over the past year, and to advance together the Global Shelter Cluster strategy. Our current strategy is for the period 2018 to 2022, so we are right in the middle of it. And this meeting helps us identify the gaps or if there are new or other priority issues that we would have to include in our strategy or remove others. The meeting is open to Global Shelter Cluster partners and Shelter Cluster coordinators at the country level. This time, as I said, it will last from October 1 to October 29 with different sessions, different days, and we will do them. All of them will take place online. You can find a full overview of the agenda in a link that you can see on your slide there in the last bullet point. Obviously, you can click on that link, but it's at the Global Shelter. But the presentation will be shared. This presentation will be shared obviously through our website. But obviously, if you go to sheltercluster.org, at the front page, the landing page, the welcome page, you have a link to the website. Yeah, Miguel, if you click one moment on here, they can have a quick look at the agenda. But more importantly, I think if you click in the iCalendar, you also will find a link to a page in the website where you can download the different sessions to your calendar. But I want to emphasize here, Miguel is putting the links in the chat, that you will have to adjust the times when you download the calendar invitation. You will, for some reason, download in your calendar with a different time. So double check. It's possible that it will download it with a different time. So double check that the right time, the correct time is the time that shows in the agenda at the Shelter Cluster website. So you might have to adjust manually. Otherwise, if you move to the next slide, Miguel, please. Otherwise, the different session organizers obviously will send you a link before the session starts and possibly a calendar invitation as well. We have decentralized the organization of the different sessions because it's over 40 sessions. And in the website, you can register to all of them, and it will take you to a page where you will see who is the session lead and you can contact the session lead by email. We have 3 types of sessions in this Global Shelter Cluster meeting this year. And they are color-coded in the calendar that you have in the website. The green sessions are plenary sessions, the white sessions are side sessions, and the gray sessions are the networking events. The plenary sessions are the sessions that provide the overall framework for the meeting and guide the discussions and the overall meeting, provide orientation for the side sessions, and bring back the consolidated feedback of what has been discussed. These plenary sessions are unrestricted, they are open to all, and these are the only sessions that we will record and made public. We will post them in the website or the YouTube channel. The other set of sessions, there are in total 4 plenary sessions. I will detail them in the next slide. The next session, the other type of sessions are the side sessions. There are different types of side sessions. These are also unrestricted participation. They are open for all to join, but obviously you will only join those that are of interest to you. So there is absolute no expectation that anyone will join each and every session. It would be impossible to do any other work otherwise for the next month. So the side sessions include different types of sessions. One is the country level cluster presentations. So the different country level clusters will present their work, their issues, their challenges, their achievements over the past year. There will be also thematic sessions where specific issues of interest or prioritized by the strategic advisory group will be discussed. And there will be a total of 3 thematic sessions. I will go over them in a little while. And there will be also Global Shelter Cluster Working Group or Community of Practice sessions, where the Global Shelter Cluster Working Groups and Communities of Practice will also present their work, their successes, their outputs, their products, or seek guidance, seek input from participants in moving forward in the implementation of their work plan. As I said, these are unrestricted as well. Anyone interested in any of these sessions, and you can find them all in the agenda on the website, can register and participate, and you will be sent the link to join those sessions, also through Teams. There will be no recording. Just, as I said, just participate if you are interested. There is no expectation that everyone will participate in this. And the last type of sessions in gray in the agenda are the networking events. These are, say, regional events, or they are events organized for country-level cluster coordinators and shelter coordination team members and shelter advisors of particular regions to get to know each other, to meet their regional colleagues, to discuss issues that may be in interest for the region, or to compare notes, to seek advice, help, to provide advice or help, to establish a bit of a regional network. This will be organized by regional focal points and the Global Shelter Cluster support team, and they are closed sessions. We will invite the country coordinators and coordination team members and shelter advisors in the different regions to these sessions. Next slide, please. I don't know now if you're seeing my video or the slides. Yeah, the slides. I apologize for the translators if I'm going too quick. I'll try to slow down a bit. I forgot that we're having simultaneous translation. So the plenary sessions, the set of plenary sessions, as I said, we have 4. The first one is the Global Shelter Cluster launch, which is the session today, the session that we are currently doing. It's mainly the opening of the Global Shelter Cluster meeting, which it just took place. Brief explanation of this meeting, the agenda, how it will develop over the next month, which is what I'm doing now, and an update on the progress in the implementation of our Global Shelter Cluster strategy, which Miguel will do as soon as I'm finished. We will and also present preliminary results of the pre-meeting survey, although the survey continues to be open for the rest of the year, so we might just skip this if we haven't had enough responses. So that's today. Then the next plenary session is the Keynote Address. We have invited the Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing, who has accepted and will present on along the lines of the theme of the Global Shelter Cluster meeting this year. Will present on the impact of shelter and settlements and establish a dialogue with the audience on this topic. This session will take place on Tuesday, the 13th of October, at the same time as today, from 2 to 3:30 Geneva time. The next plenary session will be the Ignite Talk. A group of, we think now it's going to be 3 panelists will present on the impact of shelter and settlements from their particular perspectives, and they will engage in a dialogue with the audience as well on questions, answer comments along the key messages that they will deliver. This session will take place on Wednesday, the 14th of October, at the same time, 2 to 3:30. And the last plenary session is the closure session, where we will try to summarize the main conclusions and the next steps and provide the closing remarks. This session will take place on the 29th of October at the same time from 2 to 3:30. Next slide, please. So the side sessions, as I said, this is different types of sessions. They include the country level presentations where you can listen, hear and ask and contribute on specific country level shelter cluster issues, problems, achievements, successes. The presentation will be done by the shelter cluster coordinator during I forgot to mention, all of the side sessions are 1 hour duration. Normally the first half will focus on the presentation, the second half will be open excuse me, to questions and answers, comments, but obviously it will be up to the session leads to organize them as they see fit. So they might change the outline of the session. We have, as I said, the Global Shelter Cluster Working Group or Community of Practice sessions. You can check them all out in the agenda. They will present the work, the successes, achievements during the year, seek input, and those interested in joining the different working groups or community of practice sessions should register through the links provided in the website. The thematic sessions, they are focused discussions on priority issues. The 3 that we have highlighted this year are COVID and shelter. localization, and then there will be a summary session of the different practitioner regional shelter fora that have taken place this year. But this year I think it's been 2, but there is another going on organized for Asia Pacific later in the year. So there will be one other session that will bring together the conclusions of the different regional fora and share with everyone what are the next steps. And finally, we have the open space discussions. These are 30-minute slots. These are slightly short. They are shorter. So not all of the side sessions are 1 hour in duration. The open space discussions are a bit shorter, and they are open to anyone to discuss any topic of interest. And those who are interested in this topic will join your session. We welcome any topic, any new global initiative, good to share a good practice from the field. Submissions are still welcome. So Miguel, please, next slide. So as they are still welcome, these sessions will take place between the 26th and the 29th of October. It's getting full very quickly. So if you still would like to host one of these open space sessions, you can book a slot in that link, which you cannot click right now, but we will share the presentation in the website, or in the website, in the Global Celtic Cluster meeting page, you can find also the link where you can book a slot. Alternatively, you can email Miguel or myself, and we will guide you and help you do it. Now, when hosting or applying to host an open space session, we will ask you also to prepare a 3-minute video, maximum 3 minutes, doesn't have to be 3 minutes, you can make it shorter if you want, where you will pitch your session, you will sell it for those who might be interested in joining. And you would have to share that video with us before the 10th or by the 10th of October. We will then publish all of the videos in our Celtic Cluster YouTube channel, so potential participants and Global Celtic Cluster partners can watch what the session is going to be about and decide if they are interested and if they would like to join. So these are the requirements to host an open space sessions. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to write to Miguel or myself in those email addresses there. Next slide, please, Miguel. I think that will be it. I went a little bit quick, and I know this is as new for you as it is for us. So we are ourselves trying to figure some things out along the way. But ideally, you'll be able to figure it out as well through our website, all of the links to register to the different sessions. As I said, we're always available by email. I see some questions on the chat, issues with the browsers. Perhaps try different browsers. Try Chrome. Chrome works best for me, but I don't know, for others might be Firefox or Internet Explorer. Sometimes the browsers do give issues. And if you have problems, always reach out to us by email. Are there any questions? If there are any questions, you can put them in the chat, email me, or I don't know, Miguel, if you wanted to open the floor now, or it's best to move on.
Well, we're going to give the next agenda item is we're going to give an update of the progress made by the Global Celtic Cluster in the last year. So before we get into that, we wanted to give the opportunity for you to ask any questions regarding the Global Celtic Cluster meeting. How it's going to work, or if anything needs clarification, this is the moment. You can ask those questions later as well. Let's proceed, Pablo, if it's okay. And
yes, maybe just to clarify that when you get to the agenda in the website, each of the sessions has a link, has a link that you must click to go to the description of that session. So when you click that link, it will take you to a Google Doc in your browser. And in that Google Doc, you will have a brief description of the session. You will have the email address of the name and contact details of the person who is leading the session. And you also will have a link to register to the session. It's important for us to monitor how many people are participating in the different sessions to be able to report back as well and do some analysis. So the registration is important. Also because then the meeting organizer will have the contact details of everyone who has registered and will be able to send the link to join the session at the schedule when it has been scheduled. So there is a risk that if you don't register, you will not find the link to join the session. I hope this is clear. And as Miguel said, you can send your questions at any time. And I hand over back to you, Miguel, for the next step, the next agenda item.
Thank you very much, Pablo. So, well, the next point is the progress that we have been doing collectively as a global Celtic cluster over the year, implementing our global strategy 2018-2022. Maybe a few of the highlights of what has happened since our last meeting. This has been mentioned by Brett, but as a reminder, we had a new cluster in Burkina Faso. There was a change in the leadership in DR Congo, and there were new crises in other clusters, existing clusters or existing crises. And of course, the highlight of this year was COVID-19, with all the issues that have been mentioned by Ella, by Brett. But we have continued also giving attention to all these emergencies, new emergencies, and of course the 30 active clusters that there are in the field, including the level 3 emergencies in Syria and Yemen. This is how the cluster stands as of today. So far, 75% of the funding of the 1.6 billion that are required is still missing, but we have received 406 million, and 7.2 million people have been supported. This is exactly half of the people that were supported last year. So in a way, we are following a similar track as last year. Here, this year, we have this new product. This is something that Hanoa has been working on this year, highlighting the different HRPs. And here we see that the biggest 3 HRPs are the ones in Syria, Yemen, and Congo. And they are relatively well funded. But there are other HRPs that are not that well funded. We can see, for instance, all those that have a dollar sign. So this document is available in the website for those of you who would like to take a closer look. But I think it's important to highlight that these are the top 5 countries, top 5 clusters in terms of shelter, in terms of the needs that are recorded in the HRP. The Global Celtic Cluster Support Team that has been working with all of you to support country-level clusters and to support global initiatives. This is the team that has been working throughout this year, from UNHCR, from IFRC, from IOM, and from other partners. Now we will move on to the Global Celtic Cluster Strategy and see
Sorry,
one
Miguel.
by one what is the progress.
Just one thing, on Teams, we can see you on camera, but we don't see the slides. I don't know if it's something you need to change in your...
Pablo, can you please
okay, got it.
Miguel?
Yeah. Sorry, got it.
Okay, apologies. I hope it works well for everyone. So a reminder of the 4 pillars of our strategy and the cross-cutting issues that we have: protection, gender, disability, and environment. This is the structure that we will follow in this report. We will start with strategic aim 1, which is about coordination, and it has these sub-activities. So some of the key coordination activities, of course, has been the support to country-level clusters. As you can see in the slide, a number of missions have been happening through this year. We started with a mission to Burkina Faso and Congo that I undertook. Then we had a mission to Sudan by Angel. René went to Turkey. We had also colleagues from IFRC in Indonesia technical support to Mozambique. This was Cecilia. We had also remote support provided to Vanuatu and other countries. In March, we had the COVID, and then since then, all the remote provided was from the global level as a remote support, except really that remain in Turkey for a few more months, providing support to Northeast still. Some of the indicators, according to the strategy, we see that the satisfaction of the partners with the Global Celtic Cluster has not reached our target of 90%. We only got to 80%. Hopefully, a few more people will feel satisfied at the end of the strategy in 2022. We have fulfilled our indicator of having a trained and experienced coordinator in newly activated country-level clusters or new emergencies in existing cluster of 72 hours. And we're still working with the country-level clusters to ensure that cluster performance monitoring is undertaken, and we are still a bit far from that target of 60%. We are still at 30%. So that's an area where we will continue working with the clusters. In terms of strategic aim 2 on advocacy, a number of activities have been happening, and I would like to give the floor now to Seki for a bit of a very short summary of what the Urban Settlements Working Group has been doing. Over to you, Seki.
Great, thank you. My name is Seki Hirano from CRS. We co-chair this working group together with Impact and Interaction. We've been going for about 3 years. Really started with the objective and still continue with the objective of identifying best practices and lessons on settlement approaches in urban responses, and to promote their use within the global shelter partners. So you see on the slide here, in 2018 May, we published a compendium of 30 case studies, really drawing upon the experience in the field of what it takes to do an area-based approach in urban settings. And furthermore, recently, in this year, we focused on drawing or drafting a guidance note. And this has been the focus of our working group for this year. We've hosted face-to-face consultations in various countries, including Philippines, Indonesia, Jordan, and Iraq, and had a few field visits. And we set up this process to really draw upon the best knowledge and expertise in drawing and guidance. So we've had many experts from different sectors. So we've been able to collaborate a lot with the CCCM, OCHA colleagues, of course our shelter and settlement colleagues, to draw this guidance note, which is in the final draft now, and on Monday we will have a session to really share the highlights of that, and to listen to you all how we could go further. Now that all this knowledge is collated, how can we go on to supporting members to operationalize it and take the discussion further. Also, this year, we've held numerous webinars, really forming as a platform to kind of as a space for people to share urban experiences. Last one was about 2 weeks ago. We had the pleasure of having our colleagues from the Beirut blast sharing their experience, and also 5 years on Nepal HRP really sharing their urban experiences and challenges that they're going through still. So working as a platform to really further that agenda and for all of us to kind of share A few things. That was an urban settlement working group. I'll just touch upon the World Habitat Day. 5th of October, next Monday, is World Habitat Day, and a few agencies kind of got together to agree on supporting each other's communication on that day, to really kind of highlight the message of housing for all in an urban future. So it's very simple kind of partnership that we formed with about 6 agencies so far, and everybody's welcome to join, is to, on the 5th of October, maybe two, 3 days beforehand as well, that we would follow each other's Twitter account and Facebook account, and really, just kind of commit to retweeting messages that emphasize some of those sacredness of housing or the wider impacts of shelter, etc. on that day. So the Global Shelter Cluster tweet is part of this. So you're all very welcome to follow the Shelter Cluster Twitter account near that day and on that day, and really kind of help propagate some of those messages. The COVID and shelter session, I'll just put a plug in, just that I kind of volunteered to host that next Thursday. Really, we'll explore what impact COVID has had on practitioners, and really on the second half, investigating what is it for us for the future to come. How is it going to affect us forever in a way? So welcome to join that session as well. And that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seki. Very appreciated. As I mentioned, these are just some of the key activities that the Global Shelter Cluster has been doing in terms of advocacy. As Seki has said, we've been working a lot on COVID. And one of the things that we've done, apart from creating a web page on gathering the main guidance that was being produced at country level clusters and at the global level, that page is accessible here through this link. We also gave some support in terms of advocating to other practitioners from other sectors on the key role that shelter has in mitigating the spread of COVID. As we know, any transmissible disease, and this is recognized by WHO, is exacerbated by bad housing conditions. So these are some of the advocacy activities. We will see in the next pillar. Well, these are the indicators for the pillar on advocacy. So we still haven't managed to reach our target for 2020 of 4.7% of the total funding allocated to the shelter sector. We only reached 4%, which is a little improvement from the baseline that we had of 3.7, but far from the target of 5.7% by 2022. We're working on advocacy statements. So far, 3 of them have been done. I think another one is on the pipeline. And then finally, the number of people assisted, the percentage of people assisted versus percentage of people versus the number of people targeted, it's still at 27%, but this is just mid-year. So this is, let's say, almost half of our target by the end of 2020. Let's see if we get there at the end of the year. Strategic aim 3 is about evidence-based response. And there are a number of initiatives included here. So some of the key initiatives that we wanted to flag is all the work that has been done on the Shelter Vulnerability Classification Working Group, together with GIAF, the Joint Interagency Framework, to define a much more objective and clear way of measuring vulnerability in shelter of affected population. The GIAF is, as you know, rolled out to all countries having HRPs. but the shelter vulnerability classification working group is still working on improving that system and making it much more accurate and predictable. We have advanced on a couple of research initiatives, and I would like to call Charles Parra to brief us very shortly on the progress made from the SAG on research priority themes. So over to you, Charles.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And I'm very glad to be able to talk about these themes, something that has been commissioned by the Shelter Cluster, to be able to draw on the excellent work that Global Shelter Cluster implementing partners do. And this work is very much centered around learning from the field, learning from the responses, and there is generally very good work on that learning. However, there's not so much good work on turning that learning into good quality knowledge and evidence about shelter in order that we can proceed with making better evidence-based policy. And this is very useful for advocacy. It's very useful to create advocacy messages to decision makers and also to donors. And potentially it is also very useful to fill in the funding gap that Miguel was referring to be able to demonstrate that there is good evidence for investing in shelter. And alongside the aims of this meeting, which is to be able to demonstrate that has a wide impact. If we can gather better evidence about that and demonstrate that shelter has this wide impact, we can justify more funds to be able to be spent on shelters, which will have wider impacts on some of the themes that Brett was talking about, such as health. What I want to talk about is the process very briefly that we went through with the SAG members, the strategic advisory group of the Shelter Cluster, who are comprised of many of the central agencies providing shelter and linking with housing in moving onwards into development. Because one of the things that happens with shelter is it turns into a home, and of course then lasts for a longer period of time and moves into the reconstruction or recovery or development phase, and that we see as a very powerful connection. So the work that we did together with the SAG was to ask the SAG agencies to identify what they thought were the clear areas that needed more research, more evidence gathering. And two clear priorities came up. One was what we were talking about. We need better evidence for the wider impact of shelter programs, especially health. Secondly, the priority was how cash and markets programming influence shelter outcomes. So there are some linkages there that we need to go into more deeply to find out what's happening and to be able to influence our practice. Other areas that research was needed was conflict, space standards, self-recovery, HLPSUs, and long-term impact. That's a very brief overview of what I have to say. Wednesday, the 20th of October, in an open session, we will be going into these in more detail, so please join. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Charles, for that summary of research priorities. Also, quite an interesting advance this year was the work that Interaction did on identifying messages showing the impact of shelter. How shelter can, for instance, we have an example in the screen, how shelter can reduce domestic violence. Another example on how the health of children increase with just a simple concrete floor. So these type of messages have been produced and have been tweeted and retweeted by the Global Shelter Cluster and used by country-level clusters as well. These are the indicators on the progress made on this pillar on evidence-based response. We can see that the number of cluster partners that are reporting that the response strategies are appropriate is above the target. We still have, of course, a little bit more to go to reach the target for 2022, but it seems we are getting there. We are advancing on the summary of lessons learned, and we have also reached our target. And finally, we are also the cluster coordinators and partners feel that they have access to the evidence that they need. So let's say in this pillar, it seems that we are advancing, at least in terms of indicators. Strategic aim 4 is about capacity, where the shelter sector is going to build its capacity to respond to the enormous needs that we have. And here we have, again, chosen a few initiatives to illustrate the progress made here. At the beginning of the year, we did a consultancy to support country-level clusters in becoming more localized. Here in the screen, you have an example from the Yemen cluster, where there was an analysis made of the number of partners and how they were present or not in the different fora. Maybe you can see that, for instance, the number of partners in the case of Yemen, the number of partners at the SAG is quite diverse, which is great, but this is not the case for every cluster. So this is something that we're trying to promote. This consultancy identified it for a number of clusters, 14 of them, those led by UNHCR. This was a consultancy that was undertaken by UNHCR, and then the idea is to continue working with all the 30 clusters and promote that these clusters become more localized. An effort in localization that we are also trying to do at the global level, for instance, through the translation of documents. Our website is now available in several languages, and this is the first time that we have a meeting in so many different languages. The HLP advisor is something that has continued also this year, thanks to IOM. IBERE has been deployed to countries and has been provided remote support also to operations in terms of HLP. And also on cash, there have been some progress in developing cash and rental guidelines from the cash working group. There was a comment on the chat on the cash working group. Actually, this was the last activity that the cash working group undertook to finalize these guidelines, which will be published very soon. In terms of the indicators for capacity, we seem to also be well. A good number of members of the coordination teams feel that they have the tools that they need. We are working on training people, and we managed to reach the target that we had. And actually, we are deploying people on junior roles to support country-level clusters and give them some exposure. We're not fully on target there, but we are very close to it. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about good shelter programming, those cross-cutting issues that need to be under mainstream in every shelter program, particularly two initiatives. I wanted to focus on two initiatives that we've been advancing this year at a particularly high speed, which are the Disability Working Group, and I will hand over to Lian to talk a little bit more about that, and the Environment Community of Practice, and I will hand over to Kelly. So let's start with Lian first. Over to you, Lian.
Great, thanks, Miguel, and hello to everyone. Greetings from Australia. As Miguel said, I'm Lian Marshall from Australian Red Cross. We co-chair this working group of inclusion of persons with disability in shelter programming with Nrc and Iom. This working group was set up in 2018 to build on some of the existing work that we'd already done within the cluster around looking at vulnerability and looking at the wider factors around that to integrate a kind of wider and more systematic approach to disability inclusion. So we're doing quite a lot of work, as Miguel has sort of outlined, around improving shelter programming more generally. We are also aiming to support the general inclusion mainstreaming as prioritised within the Global Shelter Cluster strategy. So really interesting work. A number of you may have been present last year and seen our presentation, and following on from the baseline report that we did last year, which was really getting an understanding of what's happening now within the cluster and where some of the gaps are and where support is needed. We've been moving forward in a number of different ways to try and advance things in this space. So we were planning to conduct a field level investigation in Cox's Bazar to see how inclusion of persons with disability in shelter and settlements programming is moving ahead, like in a real operation. That inception report was started this year, but unfortunately COVID has gotten in the way of things. But we are still planning on doing that in February next year as soon as we can get in. But we really want to get some of those on the ground responses and feedback from shelter practitioners to understand, again, where some of those gaps are and where some of the biggest support needs are, and where we can continue to add value ongoing. So alongside of that, we're working in a number of different ways to try and engage more broadly as well around this issue. And so we're engaging with different working groups and different forums, both within the sector. I should slow down because, sorry, we are getting translated, within the sector and outside of the sector, just to make sure that we're kind of linked in with a lot of advancements that are happening. So whether it's talking to the NFI working group about what we need to think about when we're thinking about disability inclusion around NFI prepositioning and what we need to be changing. We're also looking at thinking about what messaging do we need in our IEC materials. Are the IEC materials that we're presenting at the moment inclusive enough? So looking at very different angles to try, as I was saying, just to make what we're doing more inclusive. We're constantly looking for ways to sort of also stay a bit relevant. So we've also put in for a few research proposals around this. So looking at different areas. So Brett mentioned in his introduction today around the importance of data and understanding what data we need to be able to actually have more inclusive programming within shelter and settlements. And so there are some of the things that we're moving forward, and really keen to hear any issues that people are coming across, or challenges or successes that people are encountering in their field work, and would really love to hear from you and support you where we can. And please do come along. We do have a session as well on Tuesday, the 20th of October at 10 a.m. Please sign up and let us know what are the kind of things that are coming out for you, and is there anything that you'd like to share with us? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Leanne. Very appreciated. Charles, Kelly, could you come in now to talk about environment? Okay, maybe Kelly had to leave. So, well, environment, as Brett mentioned, is becoming a more and more important issue, and the environment community of practice has been extremely active in the last years. One of the, as you may know, last year, 2019, the SAG issued a statement on the reduction in the use of single-use plastic. So we've been
what time did this meeting start?
Monitoring this
Global Shelter Cluster meeting.
We've been monitoring this the implementation of this statement, and we have also the environment community of practice has advanced on a number of things. They worked on a study with the joint environmental unit of OCHA and UNEP to assess what were the main challenges that the humanitarian sector was facing in terms of addressing environmental issues, and they've been quite active. So this has been an area where we would like to work more in the future, and there is a proposal that perhaps the SAG should take a a more clear position on environment. I think this is the end of the presentation. We will have now a discussion. We would like to hear from you, well, on one hand, any questions that you may have on the year, but particularly we would like to hear your opinion. Areas that you think that the Global Shelter Cluster is not addressing and should be addressed. Issues that you think are being overlooked, or perhaps other things that are being given too much attention and we should concentrate or move on to other things. So the floor is open. Please feel free to speak. Kelly, I see that you have joined. I didn't want to put you on the spot as soon as you arrive, but if you wanted to say something on environment, you're also welcome during this time, this open session now, or open time for questions or comments.
Miguel, yeah, my apologies. Scheduling conflicts occurred, and so I just was able to get on. Yeah, I wanted to mention that environment community of practice, because we've been actually quite active in the last year, and some of the things that we've looked at are trying to integrate the reduction in plastic. And one of the things that will be coming online and we'll be talking about during the meetings are an effort to look at life cycle analysis on shelter materials, and it's in cooperation with the area British Research Enterprise, whatever its official name is. And so that's sort of an outcome of looking at the SPHERE standards, which ask for information about the carbon input or the carbon involved in providing shelter assistance. So that's something that will be coming along. There'll be a session later this month during the meetings, and we'll also be doing a survey and hopefully move forward on that, developing a tool that can be used in the field by shelter providers to assess the carbon and environmental impacts of the work they're doing. The other area we're looking at is also expanding the collaboration with the USAID initiative on packaging and the logistics cluster, and working with others to try to look more directly at the environmental impacts of how shelter assistance is provided. Overall, the environment has gotten a much higher profile in the last few years, and that's a very good thing. So that's enough for me for right now. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Kelly. Thank you very much for that overview. So, as I was saying, any other questions, any other comments, the floor is open. You can either raise your hand or you can type your question on the chat. A reminder that we have interpretation, and thanks to the interpreters for their patience. Apologies that I was speaking very fast. So also you can ask your questions in whatever language, well, in French, Arabic, or Spanish. If you prefer to do it rather than in English, you can ask it in those languages. I think we had a question on cash. Pablo, wasn't it the case? I thought maybe we were thinking that René perhaps can answer that question. So, René, would you like to talk about cash?
Yes, I can answer the question in brief. So I think David left the meeting, but he had posed a question in the chat in terms of looking at the agenda, and he said shelter and cash working group. I noticed that this does not have a working group update on the agenda. Has this working group died, or is there still appetite to work on items related to this? So just to brief and short, as you know, after many years of faithful leadership, Jake departed in March from doing his leadership of the working group. And I know at the time that we had tried to find other agencies to champion the cash working group. At the time, and it kind of came at a bad timing because I think this was at the start of the peak of the COVID pandemic. So agencies did not come forward to lead that working group. So currently that working group has not been meeting actively since Jake departed. There are Of course, still always cash and shelter and cash and NFIs and cash and markets for shelter. These are still very pertinent questions for a number of the responses. This is something that has come up repeatedly in the NFI working group. So on Tuesday, October 6th, at 10 o'clock a.m. Geneva time, we will be having a session on non-food items, but also discussing about modalities and cash and markets. So we'll be having the Somalia Shelter Cluster share on experiences of doing joint market monitoring with the WASH cluster. We will have Mozambique sharing the emergency market mapping that they did in the emergency this past year. So that will be actually presented by Catholic Relief Services colleagues. And then we will also have the Yemen Shelter Cluster share experiences about different modalities and shifting basically from standard NFI package to other types of modalities such as pipelines and that shift. So that will be our discussion during the NFI working group. We're about to create the team's invite, so keep watching the agenda on the Shelter Cluster page. And then we will share the link to the teams. So yes, indeed. So in terms of the cash specifically, if there are agencies who have something a little bit task-oriented and time-bound that they think is missing in either looking at the Shelter Cluster Coordination Toolkit or that they see as repeated themes in responses, that's something that perhaps we can discuss how we can revive that working group, or if we can merge it with some of the partners that are already working in the NFI working group who have already mentioned some themes that are similar. So please come on Tuesday, and it's certainly something that we can be in touch on in terms of how we can continue to advance on better cash and markets for more effective shelter programming. Over from my side.
Thank you very much, Renee. Thanks for that. So if anyone has any other questions, please write them, raise your hand. I see that some people are having to move on to other meetings, so you will have seen a link to the evaluation of this session. We would really appreciate if you can put it, particularly because it's the first one of the meeting, so, and it's the first time that we do an online meeting, so we would really appreciate hearing your thoughts. Tell us anything that you would like to change. One particular issue that we will be very keen to hear about is on the translation. Have you found it useful? Will you be needing this translation in the future? I know that when we had this meeting in person, we used to bring government officials, and we wanted to bring also, we did bring in the last one as well, national NGO partners, and for them, language was an issue. So I don't know if this online version of the training, of the meeting, sorry, is an opportunity for that translation, or perhaps it's not needed, or perhaps you find it useful, but for the next meetings, not for this one. So let us know about that as well in your evaluation. Pablo, have you seen any other questions? Anything else that you would like to mention?
No, I haven't seen any questions in the chat. We will also put there the link to the Global Shelter Cluster satisfaction survey for this year, because this is a key tool we have to gather feedback from our partners on how we're performing, but also because it is through this survey that we capture the key indicators for some of the Global Shelter Cluster outcomes. So yes, we will be sharing the link to that survey and encourage you, and if you are a country level cluster coordinator, to disseminate that survey amongst the people within your network. I see a question in the chat. A point we hope to explore this month is why we're not reaching the target in terms of overall humanitarian funding and therefore the response. Is there any session on funding that you recall? I know I'm quickly looking through the agenda, sorry.
No, we don't have a session as such, but perhaps, Miriam, I would like to encourage you to perhaps propose a session, an open space session to discuss this. It is indeed a very important topic, and in the survey that we do, we often see that this is rated as the #1 problem by country level clusters. But we don't have a session as such to talk about this. Perhaps, Miriam, if you would like to take the floor and explain better your question.
Sure, thank you very much. So not necessarily about the funding. I think funding will come after we demonstrate capacity and the impact of the response. So funding is a factor, and we have mentioned that, or you did, but I think it will be good to know, because we know that the shelter response is expensive by nature, is quite a bit of direct assistance, and if we can manage to demonstrate the impact, that will be good. So definitely, I look forward to further discuss this one. Does it make sense? Over?
Yes, thank you. It does make a lot of sense, and it's a very relevant issue. Actually, Miriam, if you want, we could. I'm very happy to work with you on that open space session, because it's a topic that I feel very strongly about, and we could create that space and discuss it a bit more. We have a comment from Charles. Actually, before we move to Charles, we see that there is Richard saying, putting Lizzie on the spot, saying if she has any reflections on this. I guess, Richard, you're meaning about the funding. So over to you, Richard, or over to Lizzie if she would like to react to this comment.
No, I was just saying, I mean, Lizzie, I know, has been working on this subject, so maybe she had something that she could contribute to a session on this. That was more my thought. Maybe over to you, Charles. You had something to say.
Thank you. Yes, I second the work that Lizzie's doing, being involved in that, because she has a very deep understanding of those issues. But my point was that I do think that there is a use for evidence of impact to demonstrate that when the funding is spent on shelter, it does have wider impacts, and therefore to tell a very specific story about the value of that intervention in shelter and housing being good value for money, and that the costs are not just about keeping people out of the rain, but that they are costs which the impacts of that investment in the house or the home has much more impact in education, for example, or protection. So if we can link those, and if we can find the right evidence to demonstrate that linkage, I think it may well be beneficial for the ask for the funds for shelter. And I know Miguel has, it's been something that Miguel first raised, I remember, and something that Miguel, I know, is very very keen on. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I see that there are more comments on this. Indeed, we're having a big session, one of these plenary sessions, the Ignite talk. The theme will be the broader impact of shelter. So there we will have the opportunity to explore more in detail how shelter can have an impact in other sectors, particularly in health, but perhaps in other sectors. Any other comments? Anyone else who would like to take the floor? I don't know if Miriam, I saw your hand again. Was it the previous one, or is it you wanted to come again?
No, sorry, it's over. Thank you.
Over. Okay, no problem. Bertrand, would you like to say anything? I see that you put a message there on this close coordination with other key clusters. We're going to have that session.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Miguel. I think you addressed this point. It's also, I mean, I'm just echoing what other colleagues have been saying also on the resource mobilization and how we jointly with other cluster, myself working more with protection, we fund our operation in a friendly and coordinated way, and not necessarily on a competitive way, particularly when I'm thinking about the self fund, etc. So it's just a reflection of resource mobilization and funding opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you, Bertrand. And that's a very good point. This collaboration, without trying to move away from the competition, it's something we perhaps should explore more and try to advance on that. I see that Brett has a comment as well. Brett, if you would like to come in, please, by all means. Or anyone else?
Sorry, Miguel, could you repeat, please? I couldn't hear you very well.
Well, no, I was saying that you have written something on the chat and perhaps you wanted to explain it verbally.
It was really just in relation to the observation from Miriam and then Bertrand, which is very, very accurate. The lack of funding, I think that it's a multitude of issues. You know, we've discussed this for a couple of years, certainly leading up to the establishment of the strategy. We had some deep thinking about that, and you know, we've analysed FTS. We've looked at various issues. Part of it was around advocacy, lack of advocacy, but also we knew then that we didn't have enough data to demonstrate the impacts of shelter interventions. I mean, a lot of it is kind of logical that, you know, people have inadequate shelter and there needs to be a shelter response, but still in terms of competing priorities, other sectors, cash programming, I think that there's been an erosionary effect. I also think that we don't do any long-term evaluation because the impetus of the humanitarian response winds down not that long afterward, and few people invest on the outcomes of a shelter response 3 or 5 years afterward. But where it has been done, there is a good body of evidence being established, and that's really important. So I think there's a bit of an echo there if someone's online. Thanks a lot. So I think there is a multitude of factors. It's not an easy one to unpick to a certain thing. I do think that affecting the traditional technical approaches, WASH, shelter and health, has been a move toward multi-purpose cash programming from the donors, and therefore the input data and also the output monitoring is hard to attribute to a sector. That's by default, of course. So I think we have some challenges there. I know that many other cash colleagues, Renee and others online on HEL, may have comments on that too. But I know that, you know, I was involved and some colleagues online were in the 10th anniversary evaluations of the tsunami response. And there was very clear evidence built there, you know, in 2015 that 10,000 families were surveyed across 3 countries, and they were asked, what were the top 3 interventions immediately after the disaster? And looking back 10 years later, what do you think were the most impactful interventions? And shelter came out in the top 3 for the first question and the top for the second question, over 10,000 respondents. So there is evidence out there. We have a lot from the development side of the impact of shelter. I mean, we also, I believe, do know it anecdotally from our own lives. If we're homeless, our ability to take care of our health or the health of our family is really hard. The ability to get a job is hard, and the ability to attain education for our children is hard. And there's ample data now that's been established, and the metadata evaluation done by Interaction, by Hilmi's work, Hilmi's teams, by Charles and others, is really building on that strong base. When we had the UK Shelter Forum and the joint with Oxford Brookes, I remember looking at the Oxford Journal of Public Health meta-evaluation of housing and health of 9,970 peer-reviewed articles, and the result of that was that there's deep and intrinsic relationship between health outcomes and people's housing conditions. So it's there on the development side, but less apparent for the humanitarians. And I think establishment of those linkages is also part of building this strong evidence base, advocacy to communicate that to donors, and then trying to link that through to better fundraising efforts. I mean, I could go on, but I'll leave it like that for the time being. Hopefully that provokes some thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brett. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. We have an additional question from Pierre Clavé. Pierre Clavé, would you like to do it verbally yourself? Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Miguel. Just it's one question is about the GHRP. At country level, we were mobilized to contribute to GHRP, but we didn't see the feedback. How the funds received were distributed to countries. Thank you.
Okay, I think maybe I will give my understanding, and perhaps others can complement, or can perhaps probably give much more information than myself. Either Angel or Brett. On the global HRP, actually, the funding, I don't think there was any particular funding as such requested for shelter. The funding was requested for organizations, and then those organizations that received that funding allocated it on the different areas as they saw. But Angel or Brett or anyone else, if you would like to give a much more informed answer on that.
Yes, this is Angel speaking from the Global Shelter Cluster. Yeah, the funding was allocated then later to the countries, and then they have taken a decision at country level on how that is assigned to the different sectors. But as you rightly pointed out, most of the global HRP is basically dedicated to health, a little bit to food, and mostly to protection as well. While shelter is an aspect of the response, it did not showcase itself in the GHRP as having specific indicators. So there is a question mark on how much money would have been allocated from the global HRP to shelter activities. Nonetheless, there has been an increase of funding to shelter in certain countries, but this is something that we still need to see at certain degree of detail.
Thank you very much, Angel. We see also some nice publications being exchanged in the chat. Okay, maybe I see that more people are leaving. We have 3 minutes left. Maybe before we finish, I wanted to share with you the screen. Actually, first I wanted to share this publication, which is also quite interesting, on the chat. And I wanted to share with you on the screen the schedule for next week, so that we all have an opportunity to see it before the end of this meeting. So we will, next week, as you can see, we will have the first country update on Tuesday, 5 of October from 10 to 11. No, sorry, 5 of October is not Tuesday. 5 of October is Monday. So on Monday at 10, we will start with a country update from Syria. This will include also cross-border from Turkey. Then we will have the working group update from Seki, Hilmi, and the other colleagues on the Urban Settlements Working Group. And then we will have a country update from Venezuela. So we'll start strongly on Monday. On Tuesday, this networking event for Asia Pacific cluster coordinators. Then from 10 to 11, we will have this again open session on the working group on NFIs. And then at the end of the day, the Bahamas update. And then you can see the rest of the sessions there. As Pablo mentioned, we can click on each of the sessions and we will have the connection details on how to access them. The networking events, we cannot click because they are on invitation only. So this will be all from my side. Pablo, anything else from your side? Or Brett, Ella, anything before we finish the meeting today?
Nothing else from my side. Thanks, Miguel. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Very excited for the next month of meetings and look forward to talking to many of you in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Pablo. Thanks, Miguel. Nothing much more to add. I sent my thanks in the chat box there. I can see on the agenda that you've got really good bunch of sessions over the coming months. So looking forward to seeing people online throughout the month and sharing their experiences, learning from each other. I think it'll be a really interesting and new way to proceed with the annual GSC events. So regards to all. Thank you very much.
Also, nothing to add from my side. It's the program looks really exciting, and I think people will also be looking at these publications on the side by the next meeting. So it will be quite a useful exchange. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. I'm looking forward to continue during this month. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.